My family treated me unfairly, favoring my twin. In the end, she used lies and manipulation to steal my fiancé. Life has a tendency of catching you off guard, don't you think? I, 35F, never imagined that I would be here, sharing my heart on Reddit at the age of 35. The idea that my fiancé, the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with, married my estranged twin sister after just a week of getting to know her still baffles me. What brought me here? Everything's a lengthy and agonizing tale, but I must let everything out. I suppose I ought to begin at the beginning. To put it mildly, my twin sister and I have had a complex family dynamic for as long as I can remember. My sister was obviously the star child from a young age. You would assume that parents would treat twins equally, wouldn't they? False. In our family, my sister always came first, and I came second. When we were young, it began with modest things. My sister always had the first choice when our parents bought us clothes or toys. She would always make the first choice, leaving me with anything she didn't like. Even if the products were identical but different in color, I would be lectured about selfishness, how the gifts were the same anyway, and how acting entitled would make me never get far in life if I ever objected. The preference increased in intensity as we aged. I'll admit that I resented my sister for enjoying the attention and pampering. We were never close, and as we started middle school, our distance from one another only grew. She began hanging out with the cool kids and distanced herself from our group of friends. I could at least have my buddies to myself and find some quiet at school, so in a way, this was better for me. The distance between my sister and I continued to widen throughout middle and high school. By the time we graduated, our social networks and areas of interest had entirely changed. Because I would be interacting with her less, this worked for me. Although she continued to be cruel, particularly at school when she tried to appear cool to her peers. I had grown accustomed to her conduct by that point and was not particularly bothered by it. Things between us became so bad at the conclusion of high school that there was no turning back. I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish with my life, so I put a lot of effort into my college applications. In addition, I wanted to stay up with my pals, who were all striving for top schools. Since I wasn't interested in finding out, I never inquired about my sister's essay preparation. However, for someone who wasn't ready or didn't seem to know what she wanted to do, she exuded far too much confidence in her admissions. I was devastated to learn that she was accepted to my ideal school, but I was not. Even though I was sad, I felt uneasy. I discovered just in time that she had stolen my work and turned it in as her own after doing some research. I was enraged. As usual, my parents would have told me to suck it up and that nothing could be done now, so I didn't want to inform them. I had had enough of being polite and being trampled. I made the decision to go nuclear. I sent the university an email outlining her plagiarism and proving that the material was actually mine. Additionally, I informed them of the circumstances at home and asked that they use caution when responding to her. They did, however, reply and put her on a blacklist after discovering that she had plagiarized during the application process. She sat stunned when she received the email and gave me such a hateful look that I thought I would pass out. However, she was unable to tell her parents anything. That she stole my essay? What could she have said? I was more than happy that she was finally receiving the credit she deserved, even though I knew I had put her in a difficult situation. I'll confess that it was stressful and, to me at least, a little funny. She was aware of my actions, and I was aware of hers. She was unable to go because it would require her to acknowledge that she had stolen my work, and I didn't want to go to my parents for a resolution. Unfortunately for her, this injustice devastated her parents. They insisted that there was no plagiarism involved and were resolved to bring it up with the university. It became messy at this point. When my parents emailed the institution, they received a thorough response regarding her application and the work, my work, from which she had stolen. I mistakenly thought that after they witnessed what their beloved daughter had done to me, they would finally accept her for who she truly was, and perhaps, just possibly, I would start to play a significant role in the family. The exact reverse was what took place. I spent days being scolded for intentionally destroying my sister's life and profession. They chose someone to harass as soon as they discovered that I was the one who had reported the plagiarism. She stole my work, but that didn't matter. The fact that she was at fault didn't matter. The fact that she prevented me from attending my ideal school didn't matter. The fact that I had exposed her without their knowledge was all that mattered. They called me all kinds of names and stated that talking to them about it would have been the right thing to do, after which they would have come up with a solution. I informed them that letting her leave without any consequences would have been their only option, and I would have been told to accept it and apply somewhere else. My home was a wreck, and nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. It was now obvious that I would always be the fall guy and that my sister would never be held accountable for anything she did. I was just waiting for college, but the following few months were terrible. I knew that as soon as I left the house, I would never return. In any case, there was nothing to return to, so I did just that. I instantly stopped communicating with my sister and my parents after leaving for college. After her little incident, she was dead to me, and I had no intention of ever seeing her again. Going to college was a welcome adjustment. I worked hard, had a good life, and made good friends, determining to succeed on my own without assistance from my family. I immersed myself in my studies and extracurricular activities. I met Mark around this period, and we remained friends for a few years. We had the same group of friends, even though he was my senior in college. He asked me to be his girlfriend just before he graduated, and I accepted. Since he was one of my best friends and I enjoyed spending time with him, I thought a relationship would be the natural next step. He informed me that he had been crushing on me for years and had been trying to gather the guts to ask me out until I said yes. Sincerely, I thought this was cute and informed him that even if he had asked me sooner, I would have said yes, for what it's worth. Our connection was good. We knew each other well because we were already close friends. A certain amount of ease and candor was present, and it just happened. I also told him about my family's whole predicament. I clarified that nothing could ever force me to speak to my sister again, and that I had very little contact with either of my parents. I requested that he honor that. His family is picture perfect. Therefore, he found it ridiculous that a family could be so dysfunctional. He is the eldest of 4 siblings, all of whom are supportive and close, and his parents are deeply in love. He has never experienced my ordeal. I liked and appreciated the familial dynamic he came from, and I respected that. The affection they had for one another was really sweet. I couldn't help but feel a little envious because I had never had it. But because he couldn't imagine dysfunctional families, I made it plain to him that he should never expect me to return to my family and attempt to make things right. I trusted him since he appeared fine with it. I had no idea that this would turn out to be my worst life decision. I concentrated on developing my career after college. I was resolved to show myself, and if I'm being completely honest, my family, that I could be successful without their help or connections. I put myself into my work and worked my way up the corporate ladder. I had a prosperous marketing career, a great downtown apartment, and a circle of close friends who had become my adopted family by the time I was in my early 30s. We both decided to take things slowly, but Mark and I kept dating. Neither of us felt the need to rush into marriage because we were both focused on our careers. I felt like I had at last found someone who understood and supported me, and the arrangement was comfortable. Mark proposed to me 2 years ago when I was 33. Yes, of course, I said. By that point, we had been dating for about 8 years, and I was certain that he was the man I wanted to live my entire life with. His family welcomed me with wide arms when he first introduced me to them. Even though it wasn't biological, I felt like I had a family at last. I formed separate ties with each of his siblings, who were very hospitable, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Even before I married him, I felt like I was a member of the family. The next natural step was marriage, and I was quite content with my life and my relationship. Planning for the wedding, honeymoon, and other details took up the whole year prior to our planned wedding last year. It was a difficult period for our relationship as well as stressful, since I recognized then that we had differences and that it would take work to overcome them. Nevertheless, we voluntarily persevered. While deciding on the guest list, we got into one of our most heated arguments. He wanted to invite a large number of people, including his immediate relatives, some uncles, aunts, his siblings' partners, and others, but I wanted a small, private wedding. However, I didn't have any family members I wanted to invite. I informed him that I genuinely didn't want my family near me on my wedding day and that I would only be inviting my friends. He initially agreed, but I could tell he was hesitant. When I asked him if there was an issue, he said that there wasn't, so I dropped it. Nevertheless, he approached me a week later and advised me to invite my family since there would be no wedding without a family present. I gave him a wide-eyed look and informed him that I had always made it plain that my family was not involved in my life. There was no reason to be upset about my parents' absence because they were unaware that I was engaged and that the bride and groom were the only two guests required for a wedding. He refused to give up. He said that any arguments I had with them could be put aside for a single day and that his intention was only to invite them to the wedding, not to establish a romantic relationship or extend forgiveness. Any invitation, I informed him, would imply that I wanted to patch things up, and I didn't want to do that. I should have left him there, looking back. I could tell that he had chosen to hurl this at me, even though he claimed to understand my reality and my upbringing, which I had always been open about. But in love, I was a fool. I nearly stopped talking to him after our many arguments, but I knew deep down that we had to come to an agreement. He finally explained to me why he insisted on inviting my family after much back and forth. He claimed that he didn't want his relatives to believe that he was getting married to a woman who didn't get along well with her family. He believed that my parents' absence would reflect negatively on his family, which is highly traditional and has always lived by the family-first motto. That was not what he wanted for me. I initially believed his way of thinking to be considerate and caring, but I soon came to see how flawed it was. Since his parents and siblings already knew that I didn't get along with mine, he was more concerned about the impression his family would get, particularly his extended family, than he was about the psychological effects on me. I should have seen that the show was more important to him than his wife. I paid the price for not doing so. I finally decided to phone my folks after much back and forth, but there was where I drew the boundary. I informed him that while I would have them there, my sister and no other family members would be present. My family would not be permitted to speak, and there would be no father-daughter dance. He had to put himself in my shoes, and that was the only need for inviting them. Fortunately, he consented, and he was aware that he had little other option. Additionally, I cautioned him against reaching out to people on his own. I would only call and extend an invitation when I thought the time was appropriate. I knew they would make something up and convince my sister to go if I told them too soon, and I couldn't agree to that. To be honest, I also hoped that they might not be able to make it if I told them too late. In this manner, even though I would be technically correct, I would still get my way. I believe Mark had a suspicion, but even if he had, he remained silent. So that was that. 6 weeks before the wedding, I told my parents, and they assured me that the whole family will undoubtedly be present to support me on this wonderful day. I interrupted them immediately and informed them that my sister would not be attending my wedding in any way. I would take them out myself if they attempted to be cunning and brought her anyhow. Even if just the two of them were invited, they attempted to object, claiming that it was the ideal moment for the family to get back together, that I should stop being a baby, that I had gotten my revenge, and that I should be content before the wedding. I informed them that this was the only way I would be contacting them. They were aware of the location and the time, and they could attend if they so desired, but I wouldn't think twice about taking the required action if they tried anything. I hung up the phone after that. I was completely mistaken to believe that was a strong enough warning to stop them from making any plans. I should have anticipated that my sister would show up there and cause chaos. She did create a mess, but it was far more extensive than I had anticipated. I need to get this off my chest, yet as I sit here typing this, I can feel the hurt and rage rising within me once more. What happened next was a betrayal so profound and agonizing that it rocked the foundations of the life I had worked so hard to create, and I needed to tell someone, anyone, what happened next. In my upcoming update, I'll continue this. I need some time to gather my thoughts because writing it all at once hurts too much. I appreciate you reading this far. I had no idea that I would be telling my tale in this way, but here we are. I would be grateful to hear your opinions and advice. Right now, I feel completely lost. Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and I'm still in shock about everything that transpired. We appreciate all of your encouraging messages and remarks. I never thought that strangers on the internet would be so generous. Where did I leave off then? Yes, the dreaded family invitation and the wedding planning. In case you're not convinced, things have gotten worse. My parents came into town via plane the week before the wedding. They asked if Mark and I could meet at their hotel so they could give me something. Mark persuaded me to go despite my reservations, suggesting that it might be a peace offering. He assured me that he would accompany me and that we would depart as soon as difficulty appeared. I felt sick to my stomach when we got to the hotel. I sensed a problem as soon as we entered their room. My twin sister was seated on the bed, grinning smugly. And there she was, just a few days before my wedding. My parents had ambushed us in the hopes of forcing a family reunion. I went cold. The old emotions of hurt, betrayal, and rage returned with a vengeance. Mark put his hand on my back when he could tell I was upset, but it didn't help much. With her arms extended as though the past 15 years of separation didn't matter, my mother took a stand. "We thought it was time to move on from the past," she remarked, her voice brimming with fake tenderness. "Your sister wants to talk to you about something." My sister got up and began what seemed like a prepared statement before I could respond. "I apologize for what happened with the college application, and I know I hurt you," she started. "I've regretted that ever since. I was foolish and young." I gave a sour laugh. "Young and dim-witted? We weren't 8, we were 18. You were fully aware of what you were doing." My father added in a firm tone, "Now, let's avoid bringing up previous points of contention. As a family, we are here to move forward." I looked to Mark, expecting him to support me and remind them of our wedding deal, but he was silent and had a serious look on his face. I trembled as I murmured, "Mark, may we go now?" After he paused, he said something that completely shocked me. "Perhaps we ought to listen to them. After all, they are trying." I turned and left the room without saying another word, trying to make sense of what had happened. I headed to the hotel bar and ordered a heavy drink. Hours went by. My phone was vibrating, and I chose to ignore the never-ending barrage of missed calls and messages. When I eventually returned to our flat, it was already midnight. Mark was pacing the living room while she waited, awake. Hours passed while we argued. Mark insisted that I should at least attempt to make amends because family was vital. How he could be so oblivious to the suffering they had inflicted upon me was beyond me. We were clearly at a standstill as the night went on. "I need some time," I responded at last. "I'll be spending a few days with a friend. I must think." The days that followed were a haze. I ignored Mark and my family's calls and texts and stayed with my best pal. I needed time to reflect and determine my true desires. The more I considered it, the more I saw how deeply Mark's actions had damaged my faith in him. I eventually consented to meet with Mark 3 days prior to the wedding. A calm cafe where we had gone on our first date years prior served as a neutral setting for our meeting. I didn't miss the irony. Mark appeared awful. He appeared to have aged years in a matter of days, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I was still angry and hurt, but I also felt bad for putting him through this. He started, "I'm sorry," as soon as I took a seat. "I ought not to have pressured you to make amends with your relatives. I was mistaken." Hours passed while we recapped past exchanges and upsetting experiences. Ultimately, we reached a decision that felt necessary but shattered my heart. Mark whispered, "I think we need to postpone the wedding. We clearly have some issues we need to work through." With a mixture of relief and regret, I nodded. "I think that's for the best." We came away from the cafe with a rough plan. We would separate for a month, avoid communication, and give our desires some serious thought. We would then get together once more to determine whether to proceed with the wedding or, well, we didn't want to consider the other option. I began making calls the following day. I informed our vendors that the wedding would have to be postponed indefinitely. Although we lost some deposits, most were understanding. I communicated with our visitors by sending out a general email outlining the circumstances in ambiguous language. Then there was quiet, like an unending desert. The month without communication stretched out in front of me. To distract myself from the uncertainties of my relationship, I immersed myself in my work and picked up new interests. I initially incessantly checked my phone, half hoping, partly expecting, to find a message from Mark. However, I noticed that I was checking less and less as the days stretched into weeks. During our connection, I began to rediscover aspects of myself that I had previously allowed to slip away. I started painting again, got back in touch with old acquaintances, and even went to the beach for a weekend by myself. I experienced a mixture of dread and excitement as the months' end drew near. Another part of me, which was getting stronger every day, questioned if perhaps this separation was for the best. But I still wanted to see him again, to see if we could salvage what we had. I received a call from an unknown number the day before our scheduled meeting. I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years when I responded, the shaky voice of my sister. "Please, don't get married to Mark." Suddenly, my world began to shift on its axis once more. However, that is a tale for a future update. I apologize for leaving you waiting, but I need time to think about what transpired next. I appreciate everyone listening and helping me get through this nightmare. I will return soon with additional details about the story. Update 2. My previous update was almost 11 months ago. I'm sorry for the extended silence, but I needed time to take it all in. I appreciate your support and patience, everyone. My estranged sister had just given me a startling phone call, urging me not to marry Mark when I left off. From there, however, things only became more difficult. I met Mark the following day as scheduled after that enigmatic call. I knew something was seriously wrong the moment I laid eyes on him. He had black circles under his eyes and appeared gaunt. I was about to respond when he suddenly exclaimed, "I made a terrible mistake." My heart fell. My world was shattered by his next statement. With his voice hardly audible above a whisper, he admitted, I married your sister." I briefly believed I had misheard him. How was it possible for him to wed my sister? Only a month had passed since our separation. I experienced a wave of nausea as the reality set in. Mark then told me an absurd story that sounded like the storyline of a poorly written soap opera. My family apparently persuaded Mark to listen to them after I left that day. They told him stories about my early years, portraying my sister as the victim and myself as the troublemaker. What's the worst? He took them at face value. I felt offended and bewildered. Your family seemed so sincere, and I thought maybe I didn't have the full picture. Mark attempted to clarify. I made a foolish choice. My sister and parents had hatched a complex scheme to avoid being made fun of by his family. They proposed that Mark wed my sister for the ceremony. After the commotion subsided, they could have the marriage dissolved or divorced. Despite the absurdity of the proposition, Mark had somehow consented while he was confused and being manipulated. Stunned into stillness, I sat. I was so deeply and profoundly betrayed that I was at a loss for words to describe how angry and heartbroken I was. I got up at last. "I never want to see you again," I stated in a remarkably composed tone. "You, my sister, my parents, you're all dead to me now." The weeks that followed were a jumble of suffering, rage, and incredulity. Unable to face the world, I took a leave of absence from my job. Despite the support of my friends, I was distraught during this depressing time. Mark's mother called me out of the blue. Something compelled me to answer the phone, even though I didn't want to at first. "Please," she said in a tearful voice. "I must see you. You must be aware of something." I agreed to meet her against my better judgment at a little park close to my place. We first met. Her eyes were red from sobbing, and she looked terrible. She disclosed the whole scope of what had happened. Mark had been duped by my family, who had played on his fears and fed him tales about my background. They had persuaded him that I was unstable and that I had fabricated tales about my family in the past. But why would he believe them over me? Still having trouble understanding, I asked. Tragically, she shook her head. "He had a susceptible condition. Your relatives took advantage of the fact that your abrupt departure had unsettled him." She clarified that Mark's family had opposed the hurried union with my sister. Despite their attempts to dissuade him, Mark had carried out the plan while in a confused and manipulated state. "And now?" I inquired, fearing the response. "Your sister won't get a divorce from him. By threatening to demand a large amount of alimony if he attempts to leave her, she has been dragging the marriage along." However, the disclosures did not end there. She informed me that my sister had told them the truth about everything a few days prior while intoxicated. She acknowledged that all they had told him about me was false and that they had trapped him. She even came clean about the essay that had been stolen all those years ago. Her words, "Mark has been devastated since then. He'd like to speak with you. He claims that he made the most significant error of his life and is unsure of how he would ever be able to apologize. Perhaps you can speak and decide what to do next, he hopes." With my head spinning from all this new knowledge, I gazed at her. I felt somewhat vindicated because the truth had finally surfaced. However, a greater portion of me was just worn out. "Well," I answered in a stern tone, "thank you for sharing all of this with me. But Mark and I are no longer a we." He decided. Regardless of their marital status, he is now my sister's husband. I refused to interfere or assist him in getting out of this situation. When I said this, she sobbed and begged me to change my mind, but I refused, telling her my decision is final. I've moved on from that phase of my life. I'm unable to reopen those wounds. She texted me several times over the course of the following few days, urging me to speak with Mark, but I didn't reply. All of this was too much for me to handle anymore. I thought a lot about everything that had happened, including the life I had nearly committed to, the man I thought I knew who had deceived me so profoundly, and the family that had never really welcomed me. And I came to the crucial realization that I was stronger than everything. At that moment, I decided to use my experience as a springboard rather than a setback. I had been granted another opportunity to live my life as I had always desired, free from the burdens of my past. With fresh energy, I pushed myself back into my work. In order to resolve my trust difficulties and the residual pain from my family's betrayal, I began therapy. I became closer to my pals and was even more grateful for the family I had chosen for myself. And what do you know? Things improved. It wasn't always easy, and on some days, I felt like the hurt and rage would get the better of me, but I gradually began to recover. I can state with confidence that I'm in a better place than I've ever been after 10 months. I've taken up new interests, gotten promoted at work, and even resumed dating, albeit informally and much more cautiously. Ever since that day in the park with Mark's mother, I haven't heard from Mark or my family. I'm thankful they're no longer in my life, but occasionally I wonder what happened to them. They are responsible for the repercussions of their own acts. I want all of you out there who may be experiencing anything similar to know that things get better. You are stronger than you realize, even though it may not feel like it right now. Never allow a friend, family member, or romantic partner to make you feel less valuable than you actually are. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. This is going to be my last update on the matter. This chapter of my life is coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to many more joyful ones. Cheers to fresh starts, selected families, and the inner strength we discover when we need it most. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.